The bus groaned as it climbed, tires chewing at ice and packed snow, metal frame creaking in the cold. On either side of the narrow mountain road, the world was nothing but white and stone, the drop on the right swallowed by a curtain of glare. The glass in the windows turned that glare into a flat, blinding sheen that made the soldiers inside squint even before they'd properly woken up. Entering Avalanche Alley, the driver called over his shoulder, voice too loud in the muffled quiet. Last best chance to change your mind. A few boots thumped against the floor in response. Someone chuckled weakly. Most just tightened their harnesses or adjusted their gloves, feeling the subtle shift in energy that always came with the words choke point. Rhea Holt sat 3 rows from the front, on the left side, shoulder pressed against the cold metal wall. Her rifle lay across her knees, wrapped in a gray sling, bolt locked, optic capped. She had her chin tucked down in the hood of her parka, eyes half-lidded, watching the glare slide past outside. Her stillness was practiced, almost misleading. It made her look tired instead of coiled. The bus's diesel engine rumbled through the floor. The escort vehicle ahead, an armored truck with a turret-mounted gun, threw back clouds of powder that swirled in their path. The second escort followed behind, just out of view, its presence known only by the occasional burst of static on the internal net and the subtle surges of speed when the convoy hit clear patches. Inside, bodies were crammed into 2 facing rows, wrapped in winter camo, helmets perched or strapped under arms, rifles upright between knees. A single civilian, the systems engineer, sat strapped in near the middle, hugging a hardened case to his chest like a life raft. His glasses kept fogging every few minutes. He'd wipe them with a gloved thumb, then peer nervously at the ceiling. For a moment, it was almost peaceful. Breath clouds, the soft rasp of fabric, someone humming under their breath, just loud enough to be annoying. Then the world in front of them exploded. A concussive flash lit the windshield, followed by the flat, angry thud of impact. Rhea saw the escort truck pitch forward, nose suddenly swallowed in a spray of snow and flame as an RPG slammed into its hood. The muffled interior of the bus became a box of noise. Metal shrieking, men swearing, someone yelling, "Contact front," as the driver cursed and jerked the wheel. Machine gun fire erupted from somewhere above, the sound like a chainsaw through sheet metal. Bullets hammered the bus's front armor with a drumming that rattled the windows. Glass frosted with spiderweb cracks as a few rounds punched through, spraying the dashboard with chips. "Ambush! Ambush! Left high, right low!" the platoon leader barked. Lieutenant Mason lunged from his seat, grabbing the overhead rail as the bus swayed. Stay in! Stay in! Guns up, eyes out!" From the windows, all anyone could see was muzzle flash and smoke. Lines of tracers stitched down from the snowy ridge on their left, slashing through the white like angry red threads. To their right, lower on the slope, more fire kicked up, chewing at the outer skin of the bus and the road's edge. An L-shaped kill zone, Rhea's mind supplied automatically. High ground on one side, enfilade from the other. Perfect geometry. Where the hell? Ortiz, the radio operator, twisted in his seat, headset already clamped over his ears, fingers digging for the push-to-talk switch. Before he could key it, a second explosion slammed into the escort truck. The vehicle jerked, then rolled onto its side, spinning out of view as the bus hurtled toward it. "Brake! Brake!" Mason shouted. The driver's reply was half cut off as a burst of fire punched through the windshield. His shoulders snapped back, blood misting the air. His hands spasmed on the wheel, jerking it hard right. The bus lurched, tires losing traction for one terrifying heartbeat, its heavy bulk drifting toward the cliff's brink. Gravity reached up like a hand. Rhea's body moved before her thoughts caught up. She jammed her boots against the floor, hands clamping down on the seat in front of her. Around her, men were slammed sideways, one soldier tumbling out of his harness, another smashing his helmet into the glass. Mason lunged forward. He grabbed the wheel, one boot stomping down on the brake pedal. The bus shrieked, metal grating, the whole frame shuddering. For a second, the horizon outside tilted nearly to vertical. the white sky filling their view and the drop into nothing yawning below. Then the tires caught. They stopped with a final, stomach-twisting lurch. The bus came to rest at an angle, half its right side wheels flirting with empty air, the rear axle complaining. Everyone who'd managed to hold on sucked in a breath at once. "Status," Mason shouted, voice hoarse. "Contact all around," someone near the back yelled. "Left and right." They're dug in. Over the roar, Rhea heard the staccato cough of machine guns above and the flatter clap of rifles below. Muzzle flashes popped in the upper ridge snow caves and lower rock crevices, bouncing orange light off the ice. "We're in the kill box," Rhea muttered, mostly to herself. The phrase wasn't dramatic. It was simply accurate. Ortiz pressed his headset tighter. "Thunder, this is—" His words cut off as his eyes widened. "Sir, comms are trash. I've got nothing but noise." Mason snapped his head around. "Say again." "Static. Whole net just went white." It's another hammering burst of fire raked the front of the bus, bullets punching through the outer armor. One round pinged off a seat frame inches from Rhea's knee. Another tore into the overhead, showering them all with foam. "Get low," Mason shouted. "Watch those windows." They ducked. Still, every pane became a fragile, shimmering trap, tiny fractures irradiating across the surface. Snow and smoke blurred the outside into a swirling nightmare, muzzle flashes winking like malicious stars. Down the road, the overturned escort truck burned steadily, orange flame and black smoke fighting with the bright white of the snow. Behind them, the rear escort vehicle tried to reverse, only to be hit by a mine farther back, the road heaving as a buried charge went off. It slewed sideways, blocking retreat. In a matter of seconds, forward and rear exits were gone. Then Rhea saw him. The enemy RPG gunner stepped out from a shallow trench upslope to the left front of the bus. He wore white over whites and a scarf pulled over his face, but his body language was casual, almost clinical, as he raised the tube to his shoulder. He was standing in a pocket of terrain that turned the bus's own shape into a shield against return fire. Anyone inside who tried to angle a shot at him would have to stand, lean, and expose half their torso in a window that was already being chewed apart. "Left front RPG," someone screamed. I can't see him." "I got nothing," another voice shouted. "Angle's dead." Rhea's eyes flicked over the interior. Nobody had the shot. The bus's height, the curve of the road, and the gunner's positioning all combined to make him effectively invisible to anyone inside. Except she could see him. Clear, just beyond the shattered fragments of the windshield, framed against the slope. The tube flared as he snapped the safety off. "Down!" Mason roared, throwing himself over the driver's corpse as instinct and training collided in his voice. "Down, down, down." Rhea pressed her cheek to the seat edge. The world shrank for her into lines. The arc of the road, the angle of the gunner's shoulders, the way the tube pointed just slightly upward, compensating for distance. The rocket left the tube in a lance of smoke. At that exact instant, another sound sliced through the cacophony, a single crisp rifle crack, distant, distinct, almost surgical. It didn't match any of the stuttering weapons rattling the bus. It was a clean note amid a badly tuned orchestra. The RPG gunner jerked as if yanked by a hook. The rocket wobbled in flight, its trajectory skewing. Instead of spearing into the flank of the bus, it slammed into the cliff wall opposite, detonating in a shower of rock and snow that battered the bus's side but didn't punch through its armor. Everyone inside flinched at the blast. Then the stunned silence that followed felt louder than the explosion. "What the hell was that?" one of the soldiers gasped. The RPG tube tumbled from the dead man's hands, spinning end over end down the slope. His body toppled into the trench, a dark splotch spilling across white. "Who took that shot?" Mason demanded, whipping around. "Who's got eyes?" The bus's internal net crackled with overlapping denials. "Not me, sir. No visual. I didn't have him. My angle was blocked." Rhea blinked, mind racing. The entry wound she'd glimpsed in that fraction of a second hadn't matched any line from the bus's windows. The man had folded sideways, not backward. The shot had come from somewhere else entirely, from a direction she couldn't easily map inside her mental geometry. Overwatch is offline, Ortiz stammered. We don't have any friendly birds, no rooftop teams. Command retasked them. Then who? Mason's eyes flicked to the windows, scanning the ridge. Who the hell just saved us? Outside, the snow kept falling, thickening into slow, swirling flakes. Enemy muzzle flashes winked on and off. The bus sat stranded, framed against the slope like a target on a range. Any shot that dropped that gunner, Rhea realized, had to come from an angle the enemy never anticipated. Some overlooked pocket of terrain. A blind angle. And if that blind angle existed, then maybe this kill box wasn't as perfect as the enemy believed. The scene seemed to pull back, as if seen from high above. The narrow ribbon of road carved into a sheer, snow-choked pass. The disabled escorts at front and rear. The bus teetering near the cliff. The arcs of gunfire pouring down. And somewhere out of sight, an unseen rifle, its operator anonymous and calm. The image of the smoking RPG tube lay frozen in her mind for an instant. The bus still stood. Everyone on board was still breathing. They were in a textbook kill box. They should not survive, and yet someone, somewhere, had just refused to let them die on schedule. Hours earlier, that someone had walked onto the bus like a shadow no one bothered to notice. Several hours before the ambush, the mountains looked almost benign. The sun was higher, throwing hard light across the peaks, turning the snow into a sheet of brilliance that nearly hurt the eyes. The air on the forward base's motor pool stung with diesel and cold. Rhea sat on a crate inside the staging tent, gloves off, fingers moving with mechanical care over her rifle. The bolt slid with a metallic whisper. Her breath drifted in small puffs as she checked the lugs, inspected the firing pin, ran a cloth over the chamber. Other soldiers laughed and shouted around her, the pre-mission noise filling the tent like warm water. Sniper on a bus. Nash joked near the entrance, shaking his head as he adjusted his plate carrier. Feels like putting a hawk in a chicken coop. Command says no ridge insertion this time, Sergeant Baker replied, strapping on his own helmet. Apparently the skies are reserved for bigger fish today. Rhea didn't look up. She tightened a screw on her optic mount and flicked the turrets gently, listening to the clicks. The platoon leader stepped into the tent. Mason's cheeks were windburned from a morning perimeter walk, his clipboard tucked under one arm. "All right, listen up," he called. The chatter dimmed. "Quick brief before you climb on." He ran them through the mission one more time. Forward outpost to High Mountain Relay Site. Cargo, a systems engineer, and a case of new software modules for the regional anti-drone network. The tech would allow their side sensors to adapt faster to enemy tactics, closing gaps that have been exploited in recent weeks. Intel suggests the other side wants this stuff badly, Mason said. They can't match us in numbers, so they try to blind us. They can't get these modules, they'll try to destroy them. We're not letting that happen. We roll at 10. Expect bad roads and possible harassing fire, but route was flown an hour ago. Came back clean. Rhea's fingers paused at that. Flew an hour ago. In this weather, with terrain this complex, an hour was a long time. A lot could change. Drones could miss things even on clear days, and the mountains were masters at hiding intentions. Questions? Mason asked. Why is the brain riding with us? Nash nodded toward the engineer, who flinched at the attention. Stick him in a bird, let him fly. The engineer adjusted his glasses and tried to look smaller. His name, Tag, Red Harrow. The hardened case on the table beside him had its own serial number, a weight obvious enough that anyone in the tent could feel its importance without being told. No rotor assets to spare, Mason said. We're the bird today. That's why we're giving him the limo treatment. He jerked his chin toward the parked armored bus outside. You'll sit in the middle, Doctor. We'll do the worrying. Rhea reassembled her rifle, slid the bolt forward, and locked it. She kept her eyes down, listening. Overwatch element. Baker asked. Holt and a spotter on the high side was the plan. Overwatch has been retasked, Mason replied, a hint of frustration coloring his tone. HQ wants their assets on a different corridor. We keep our sniper, but she rides with us. He looked in Rhea's direction. You'll be just another rifle today. A few of the others smirked. Nash raised his eyebrows. Guess you'll have to remember how to shoot from a seat, Holt. She met Mason's eyes for a second, then dropped her gaze again. Copy, she said quietly. Just another rifle. They filed out into the cold. The convoy waited. Armored bus in the middle, escorts fore and aft. Rhea climbed the bus steps, feeling the slight sway as boots and gear shifted. She chose a seat where she could see both sides of the road, dropped into it, and rested the rifle across her lap. The bus rolled out with a growl, crossing the wire, then grinding into the ascending road that wound up into the snowfields. As they climbed, the base shrank behind them until it was just a smudge of gray against the white. Rhea watched the terrain as it unfolded. Old tracks crisscrossed some of the slopes, smoothed by recent snowfall, but still there if you knew which lines to look for. On a supposedly cleared stretch, she noticed a patch of snow that sat too straight, like a wall plastered over a secret door. Packed over sandbags, maybe. A snow cave carved to conceal something unfriendly. Her gaze tracked higher. A faint reflection blinked on the far ridge, the kind that could be glass or metal. It was gone a heartbeat later, but it lodged in her mind like a splinter. She shifted in her seat, leaned forward. Sir, she said, voice low enough that only Mason and Baker heard first. I'm seeing possible prepared positions on the left slope. That false bank grid. We flew it clean. Ortiz cut in from across the aisle, one hand cupped over his headset as he talked to some distant controller. Drone was over it 40 minutes ago. No hot spots, no movement. False bank could insulate, she said, or they went in after the flyover. The tracks. We're on the clock. Holt, Mason said. He didn't snap at her, but his focus was elsewhere, on timing, on the schedule that someone back at HQ had built with its own assumptions. Keep watching. Call anything that turns into something. She bit down on the response she wanted to give. On a ridge, with a spotter and a free hand, she would have insisted, argued angles, drawn lines in the air. In a bus, surrounded by bodies, she tucked the worry away and watched. Midway up the ascent, the bus passed under a rock overhang that caught the wind and funneled snow down in a constant curtain. Harrow, clutching the case, glanced up at it like it might reach down and snatch him. He leaned slightly toward her. They said route was secure. He murmured, voice not quite steady. But in the brief they showed us some intercepted comms. The other side has been talking about cutting the eye from the sky. They really don't like your drone network. Enemy doesn't like anything that sees them coming, Rhea replied. She kept her eyes fixed on the ridgeline as she spoke. Or keeps their own birds out of our airspace. He swallowed. If they got their hands on this, he nodded at the case, they could pick apart our updates, find the holes before we plug them, blind your anti-drone system, or worse, spoof it. Make you think you're safe when you're not. Then don't let them have it, she said. He gave a joyless little laugh. I'll do my best from the middle seat. She filed away his words. Not just destruction, then if they got the chance. Capture would be just as useful to them. Maybe more. As they climbed, the sky shifted from bright to hazy. Snow began to fall in earnest, thick flakes that softened the world without actually lowering the light. The effect made the landscape look flatter, turning ridges and depressions into subtle changes in tone. Movement stood out more than shape. That was how she saw it. A flicker in a distant snow cave high on the left. Not a muzzle flash, not yet, just a distortion in the whiteness like a shadow breathing. She leaned closer to the glass, letting her breath fog it, then wiped a small circle clear with her knuckles. There was again, a tiny adjustment, someone shifting weight in a cramped position. Her hand slid to the rifle. She cracked the bolt enough to feel the presence of a round in the chamber, then closed it with a soft click. The optic's brightness got a small twist. Too bright, and the world would wash out. Too dim, and the reticle would vanish against the snow. Already, Baker chuckled when he saw. You seeing ghosts in the snow again? Maybe, she said. She didn't bother to point out exactly what she'd seen. If they didn't know how to look, words wouldn't help. Route's clean, Ortiz reiterated. Bird said so. Try not to spook our guest more than he already is. Rhea let the teasing roll off her. She mapped the road mentally, every bend and runoff, every outcrop and overhang. Her gaze snagged on the bus's ceiling hatch, a square of reinforced glass with a locking handle. Then on a small hatch in the floor, labeled Main Access. Not meant for passengers. Meant for crew, for engineers, for people who had to get below when things broke. She noted distances. Roof to sky. Floor to road. Bus to cliff. She wasn't on a ridge. She didn't have a spotting scope or a wide field. But she still had eyes and a brain that had been trained to think in angles and dead spaces. Coming up on Avalanche Alley, the driver called out, tone too casual for her liking. Keep your hands inside the vehicle, folks. The name wasn't a joke. She'd heard it whispered in the mess. It was the kind of stretch that got nicknames for a reason. Narrow road, sheer drop, tall opposing wall. A natural choke point. A place the snow liked to move in great, deadly sheets when shaken. The bus slowed as they entered the stretch. The lead escort hugged the center, its turret gun pointed outward, searching for threats that might be there or might not. The rear escort tucked in close behind, engines groaning in chorus. Rhea's neck prickled. The things she'd noticed earlier, the false snowbank, the old tracks, the flicker of movement in the cave, felt less like isolated oddities and more like notes in a melody. The kind of melody you heard right before the drums came in. She shifted her weight, making sure her harness would unclip quickly if she needed it to. Her left hand brushed the latch of the floor hatch, almost absently. Snow swirled outside. Visibility tightened into a tunnel. Somewhere above, hidden in the white, someone waited with patience equal to hers. The ambush, when it hit, didn't feel like the start of something. It felt like the closing of a trap that had been set hours ago. She saw in the snowbank first, a quiver, a wave. Then the explosion erupted, flinging rock and packed snow into the air in a blooming fan. The escort truck up front disappeared in a blossom of flame, and the world narrowed to noise and instinct and the icy smell of fear. Buried charges blew the road, both ahead and behind. Machine guns snapped awake. The convoy slammed into crisis. And Rhea, huddled in the bus with the rest, finally understood the pattern she'd been feeling since they'd left the base. This was not random harassment fire. This was a design kill box. The shockwave from the first blast hit her chest a half-second after the light. The bus shuddered as the escort truck rolled. The rear explosion followed, slamming through the floor like a rising tide. The radio in Ortiz's hand spat a messy surge of sound and then dissolved into static. He yelled into it, words swallowed by noise. His face went from tense to outright alarm. "Sir, I've lost them," he shouted. It's all white noise. They're burning us out." Rhea angled her head toward the side window, flattening herself against the floor as bullets pecked at the armor. Through the cracks between seat and wall, she saw white-clad figures popping up and down, moving with coordination that didn't belong to amateurs. They darted between pre-dug firing pits and burrows in the snow, weapons already sighted in, arcs overlapping. They'd had time to dig and align, to test their fields of fire, time to plant mines front and rear, time to set up a jamming system that now poured a stiff, steady signal into the valley, strangling the convoy's voice. The bus swung, skidding, the dead driver slumped over the wheel. Mason fought the controls and won by a hair. The bus ended up canted, its right side wheels close enough to nothing that Rhea's gut clenched when she glanced that way. Rounds hit the armor with a rhythmic violence. Windows blew inward with popping cracks. A shard of glass nipped Rhea's cheek. She wiped it away automatically, hand coming back with a smear of red. The first screams of the wounded cut through everything. A man 2 seats down grabbed at his thigh as blood pumped past his fingers. Another slumped, his chest plate pierced at an unlucky angle where armor gapped briefly for movement. The radio operator took a glancing hit to the shoulder, his gears sparking as it absorbed fragments. "Medic," someone bellowed. "We need. Everyone stay down." Mason roared. "Return fire only on my call." The engineer, Harrow, curled over the case as if his skinny frame could shield it. A round punched through the wall inches above him, lodging in the metal of the overhead rack. He flinched but didn't let go. "They're trying to trap us," he gasped, more to himself than anyone else. They're going aboard. They want. Eyes out, Rhea told him, voice calm. Her own heart hammered, like someone trying to kick their way out her ribs. Don't think about later. Just now. She peered through another tiny slice of view. Up on the slope, slightly higher than the others, she thought she could see the source of the jamming. A compact vehicle tucked behind a boulder, an antenna jutting up like a skeletal tree. Her optics' outer lens took a hit, a spiderweb starburst blooming across it as a fragment of rock or metal clipped the glass. She jerked the rifle back, half expecting her own eye to be pierced. It wasn't. She exhaled slowly, blinked gritty dust away, and tilted the scope. The damage fogged a portion of the field, but left enough clarity at lower magnification. Optics wounded, she muttered. Not broken. Baker was yelling over her. We open that door, we're minced. We stay, they'll cook us with something heavier. Mason's face was pale beneath the grime. Air will see the smoke. They'll divert. Air can't talk to us. Ortiz cut in, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Jamming's local. They can see something's wrong, but they don't know what, and they don't know where we are inside this snow bowl. Rhea ran the geometry again in her head, tracing lines only she could see. Enemy positions above could not depress their barrels far enough to hit directly below the bus. Positions below couldn't elevate past a certain angle due to the curve of the road and the bus's bulk. The bus itself created a sliver of dead space, pressed tight between its frame and the cliff wall. She imagined sliding down there. The cold, the cramped space, the risk of the bus shifting and cutting her in half. The chance that a stray shot or blast would erase that sliver in an instant. She also imagined sitting here, waiting, doing what the manual would say. Stay inside, maintain security, attempt comms, wait for relief. She thought of another mountain, another operation. The previous time, she'd obeyed a plan that hadn't accounted for real terrain. The bodies they'd carried down then had been heavy even after she'd taken off their gear. Mason was calling for volunteers, voice fighting to stay steady. We form a fire team, open the side door on my mark, sprint to the inner wall, try to climb. Sir, Rhea said quietly. He didn't hear her at first. The bus was too loud, the air full of shouts and impacts. Sir, she said again, louder this time. He turned, irritation flashing, then fading when he saw her look. Hold. There's a dead space, she said. Bus to cliff. They can't shoot what they can't depress to. I can get into it through the floor hatch. We open the hatch. We lose heat, Baker snapped. It was a stupid objection, and he knew it, but fear made people grab at anything. They're not trying to freeze us, she said. They're trying to kill us before the cold does. Or pull us out alive. They'll bring heavier stuff if they think we're stubborn. We don't know what's under us, Mason said. Could be nothing but air and prayer between this bus and a 100-meter drop. I saw the road on the way in, she replied. There's a shelf. Narrow. Enough lip to catch a tire. Enough to catch me. Even if you make it, Baker pressed, you step out from under this bus and you're in an open kill zone. They'll carve you up. I'm not going out, she said. I'm going under and back. Their arcs are set for the road and the flanks. Nobody plans for someone to fight from the crack onto the target. Mason stared at her. A burst of fire smacked into the wall behind his head, another puncturing the floor near their boots, sending up a geyser of rubber and steel shards. He flinched, then forced himself still. You think you can reach that jammer? He asked. Yes, she said. Saying anything else wasn't useful. He looked over the bus, at the wounded, at the engineer clutching the case, at the men trying to return fire through slits of glass that gave them almost nothing. The snow outside was thickening now, visibility compressing. That would help the enemy more than them. The attackers knew these positions, had aligned their sights beforehand. Options unfolded in his mind and dropped away just as quickly. All right, he said finally, voice hard. You do what you have to. Priority is that jammer. You knock it out. Maybe we get help before this turns into a hostage standoff. Rhea unclipped her harness. Her fingers were steady. She slid to the floor, working her way to the small hatch near the bus's midsection. A few pairs of eyes followed her, some incredulous, some oddly relieved, like watching someone walk willingly into a storm they themselves couldn't face. You sure about this? Nash called down, trying for humor and not quite making it. No, she said, but it's better than waiting. She flipped the hatch latch with the butt of her hand. Cold air knifed up immediately, smelling of metal and raw rock. The noise of the gunfire dulled, as if someone had partially shut a door on it. She looped her rifle's sling across her chest and shoulders, then swung her legs into the dark. For an instant, as she hung from the hatch, she was suspended between two worlds, the cramped, chaotic interior above and the unknown below, where only her intuition and a memory of the road's curve told her there would be something to catch her. She let go. Her boots hit iron. The underside of the bus was a maze of pipes, axles, and crossbeams. Beneath that, inches from her toes, a narrow shelf of rock jutted out. Beyond that, nothing. She pressed her back to the cliff, breathing shallow. Gunfire above turned into muted thuds, the vibrations trembling through the bus's frame. Snow, slush, and dust trickled down in a constant, silent rain. In that thin slice of space, barely wider than her shoulders, everything was weirdly quiet. No direct arcs of fire reached here. No one outside could see her unless they leaned over the edge or lay flat under the bus, both suicidal moves for the attackers. She moved hand over hand along the frame, fingers going numb as they closed on metal chilled by the mountain. Every few feet, she paused, braced herself, and swung the rifle ahead into a gap between beams, angling the optic toward the outside world through a wheel well or a seam. Her damaged lens made the picture foggy around the edges, but the center held. On low magnification, she could still distinguish shapes, movement, and the small details that mattered. Halfway along, a secondary charge they hadn't triggered yet blew somewhere near the rear escort. The shock wave rolled toward them like a physical thing, rattling the bus. It shifted a fraction, one of the wheels scraping stone. Rhea's boots slid on a sliver of ice. She felt herself start to fall. Instinct snapped her hands up. Her fingers caught a crossbar with a jolt that nearly wrenched her shoulders from their sockets. She hung there, weight pulling, boots pedaling empty air for a heartbeat before she found rock again. Her breath came fast now, vapor pluming in the cold, but she forced it to slow. Panic would make her clumsy. Clumsiness would send her down into the void. Above, the roar of gunfire continued. Someone screamed in pain. Someone else shouted over them, voice raw. Step by step, grip by grip, she edged along until she reached the rear wheel arch. There, she found what she'd hoped, a jagged seam in the cliff where frost cycles had broken the rock. It formed a narrow, ugly ladder up the wall, invisible from the road. She slung the rifle behind her, wedged her fingers into cracks, and began to climb. Snow and grit scraped her knuckles raw. Once a loose pebble she dislodged rattled away and took too long to stop, the tiny echoes stretching into a reminder of just how far down the drop really went. At last, she reached a shallow notch, just high enough that the bus's rear corners sat below her line of sight. She wormed into it, chest pressed to cold stone, boots braced. From there, the ambush's geometry changed. She could see the lower slope where a team of enemy fighters waited behind rocks, poised to rush the bus. She could see the upper positions that spat machine gun fire in fixed arcs, burning ammunition to keep the convoy pinned. And she could see the jammer vehicle upslope, snug behind its boulder, antenna aimed like a spear at the road. From the bus, those spots were half hidden, protected by terrain and the limitations of the windows. From here, they were exposed in ways the enemy hadn't considered. She eased the rifle around, careful not to let the barrel protrude too far. Her fingers were stiff, but she still felt the familiar settling of the stock in her shoulder, the way the world narrowed to the circle of glass and the crosshair at its center. She checked her magazines by touch. Not many rounds left. Enough to matter if every shot counted. Not enough to waste on panic. In her head, she built a ladder. Jammer first, then the officer directing fire on the ridge, then the RPG teams, the machine guns, the spotters. Lastly, if there was anything left in the magazine, and in her shoulders, the climbers who would eventually realize someone was out here, changing the rules. She whispered the order under her breath, not because anyone needed to hear it, but because saying it made it real. It was a private contract, inked in the air she could see drifting from her lips. Up inside the bus, the others fought blind, trapped in a diagram someone else had drawn. Down here, in the thin blind angle between steel and stone, Rhea Holt began to redraw it.